This is not a review. This is a story of greed and arrogance. You might be thinking, what the hell is a Kingsman UnIvErSe? And honestly, me too. There is nothing more off-putting, more toxic to hear these days than the words shared universe. It is such a cancer to modern-day media, it immediately puts me off from watching anything. Rarely does it actually work out. And honestly, I begin rooting for a shared universe to fail as soon as it gets announced. Because let's be real, it's more often than not just a very fancy way of saying we want your money. But never has it become as personal to me as when this plague reached Kingsman. I have to now live in a world where Kingsman the Secret Service shares a universe with the floppy schlong of 2024, Argyle. Remember that? I sure as hell hope you don't. But a pipeline between Kingsman and Argyle sadly exists. For a quick recap, the Kingsman universe now has 4 movies in total. The first Kingsman, the second, the prequel called The Kingsman, and Argyle. And out of 4 of them, only one of them is actually good. We have a universe where only 25% of it is good, and 75% of it are varying degrees of decent to crap. At this point, it is a hate-hate relationship between me and this universe. I hate it, and I feel like this universe also hates its viewers. This won't be as analytical as my other videos, since honestly there is not much to analyze. But the road from Kingsman to Argyle is a crazy one. So take my hand. Oh, it's kind of sweaty. I said fucking take it. And let's go down the road of the rise and the fall of the Kingsman universe. So here comes the protagonist of this saga, the director of these movies, a man named Vaughn. So the story goes that once upon a time he was at a bar with a pal of his, and they were discussing spy movies. They were remarking how they have become too serious, so they said, let's make a fun one. And so comes along Kingsman. Listen. It's a cool movie. I am personally no expert in the genre. I just know that this movie is supposed to satirize it. I usually stay away from spy movies since they are so serious that it borders on cringe. So it is easy to see why this movie spoke to me in particular. For what it is, the movie is not one of the most original ones in its core concepts. We have the spy agency, we have an underdog who works his way through all the posh pricks and gets to the top against all odds, we have the mentor figure, but the originality of it comes from how it puts those tropes to use. The spy agency becomes hidden under the front of a tailor shop. Their aesthetic becomes centered on being well put together and practicing manners. That looks dope to see, naturally. The movie is meta and self-aware. It has a kooky quirky villain who makes SIM cards and tries to control people. It has some nice action scenes, it has humor, it has it all. Generally, it is a very energetic film. It makes just enough sense, it gives you someone to root for, it entertains you. What else is there to do? Honestly, I freaking loved it. For the longest time, Kingsman the Secret Service was my comfort film, my little go-to whenever I wanted to chill. Now, the one thing that the movie does that really elevated it for me, and I think everyone can unanimously agree that it was a bold move, is that he killed the mentor character. What happens is that the mentor character who takes in our protagonist, Eggsy, under his wing named Harry Hart, gets to face the villain, Richmond Valentine. They yap together for a bit, and then the villain straight up shoots him in the head.
Well, this ain't that kind of movie.
This is the choice that earned my respect. Honestly, I didn't think they would do it, and they actually did it. I think the way it is shot is also quite interesting, because usually in these types of movies, it is said that if we haven't seen the body, that means the character isn't really dead. The scene feels like a direct response to that. We literally see the dude be shot right in the head, which would suggest that there is no way the man is alive or is coming back, right? I think storytelling-wise, it also feels somewhat like a defining moment for Eggsy. Let's apply comic book movie logic to it for a second here. And yes, this movie is indeed a comic book movie. Eggsy is our hero, and this movie pretty much reads like an origin story for him. Losing Harry is kind of a moment that gives the hero some additional motivation to act. Yes, while the movie is overall unserious as hell, it does have an emotional underbelly. I did say that it had everything. And speaking of this being an origin story for Eggsy, here is a quote of the director calling the movie the prequel to Eggsy's movie. So since the movie was actually good, it received great reviews. Some people had their qualms, but things were looking pretty cool. Now let's talk about the movie's marketing for a second. Because when it comes to marketing, the team behind this particular movie pulled all stops. And I mean, they teamed up with clothing brands, made entire lines of clothing. But the most interesting bit comes from what they didn't end up doing. So imagine this. They wanted to do a teaser and have actors from previous Bond movies have a little toast about the new generation of spies. And then it would supposedly reveal Eggsy and Harry. I mean, if I was being completely honest with you, the idea is pretty cringe. And I'm kind of glad it didn't happen. But let's apply some discourse analysis focus on this puppy. I think that what this idea indicates is the amount of faith Matthew Vaughn had in his movie. This is what, 2014? Before all the big universes and Squid Games and the overabundance of media in general? The landscape was a bit different, so it was slightly more of a ballsy move to say that you were about to introduce the next generation of anything, really. Statements like that nowadays feel like they happen at least thrice every week, from the way some directors talk about their projects. So the movie comes out, it makes tons of money. Vaughn said before that a sequel was possible if the movie performed well enough. And unfortunately, and this is a very big unfortunately, it did perform well enough. The success of the first film was a clear indicator for Vaughn that he should make more. Well, that didn't take long. Yep, one movie out, we are already in the flop era. So the second movie, titled Kingsman: The Golden Circle, was released in 2017. You could say that the box office of the previous movie basically told Vaughn that he struck something in there, and there was a market for more of the same. He heard the interest in more of the same, and he kinda took that personally. Because Kingsman 2 is sort of kind of the same thing as the last one, I already said that at the narrative level, the first Kingsman is not that original, really. And the originality problem from here on out really becomes a problem. There are some tweaks though. You would think that this is the time that we would see Eggsy take on some missions with Kingsman now that we basically saw his origin story. You thought wrong, because Kingsman literally gets obliterated. It is yet another ballsy move, but motives for this one move may not solely be to satirize or mock anything. We will get to this, worry not. But other than that, why? This move does not add anything. What is criminal is that the first movie sets up characters such as Roxy, but she then gets killed? Why? So we get introduced to Seisman, a supposed American cousin of Kingsman. Get it? Both names end in man, and therefore it's thematic and cool. This organization is barely developed, and it has Channing Tatum and Pedro Pascal for some reason. I really have come to hate when movies do this. They introduce these other things that are like the first thing that we liked, and that other thing is just a reskin of the first thing. I mean, they could have used them to contrast the organizations in some way, show how one of them is better than the other and vice versa. None of that really happens. It's just there. It's boring and honestly cringe. The movie also for some reason goes all in on this weird tech, which doesn't even really aesthetically fit with the first movie at all, so there is that, I guess. Then we get to the villain. This time around it is Poppy Adams, quirky cookie villain number 2, who wants to control the world. Somehow they put the previous villain in a different font, but somehow make her boring. Basically, her whole thing is that she controls the drug trade, and then she poisons it and spreads a disease that only she has the antidote to. It is just a very obvious case of sequelitis. Anyway, that is not the main qualm I have with this movie. Up until this point, it would have been a fine movie. Serviceable even. This is where the wonkiness really starts. So a funny thing happens after the first film. It's a success, right? So then Mr. Vaughn begins yapping about a sequel. For some unknown reason, there is a discussion whether Colin Firth is returning. You know, the dude who played Harry Hart? The person who got shot in the head? So there comes out a little piece on one of the USA Today websites. Let's read it together, shall we? So the article dares to ask, is Colin Firth returning for a Kingsman sequel? Why am I doing an accent? A question I still have no idea why anyone would ask, but anyways, it proceeds to recap the scene where Harry gets shot or whatever. Now hear this. Afterward, though, Valentine shoots him in the head in the parking lot, and the wide shot shows his body crumpling to the ground. Really? You don't say? Okay. We never see the body or a funeral after the good guys save the day. And it might be because director Matthew Vaughn told us he has plans for Firth's possible return. I'm sorry, but did the writer of this article and the director of this movie collectively miss the part where he got shot in his fucking head? What do you mean we didn't see the body after the good guy saved the day? Oh, and the best part comes right after, since Vaughn had something to add to this Pulitzer-winning article. A lot of people are very upset that Colin might not be in the sequel, but I am coming up with ideas at the moment. If people buy tickets in America, I've got a feeling we'll figure out a way for having Colin back. I don't get paid enough for this. I would like to meet these people who are very upset that Colin might not be in the sequel, because anyone with any common sense wouldn't be in the category of a lot of people that are very upset that Colin might not be in the sequel. So then the person behind the Kingsman comics decided to speak up, and he said, that's the conversation everyone's having right now, because part of what made that movie work is Colin. Colin's fantastic. It was a two-hander, that film. You also want to have integrity of the story. So if you're bringing him back, it has to make sense, Miller said. Now, am I the only one to whom this sounds stupid? In what world does a story maintain integrity while bringing Harry back? I mean, the man got shot in the head. Some things have to be worked out. Some decisions still have to be made and everything. So it's all fairly amorphous. But all going well. It's funny because there's a lot of conversations like that. Like, should we have an evil brother, Colin with a mustache? Or is he a ghost? Or whatever. The guys have a plan. I can't spoil it just now because the final decision is still to be made. It'll be good. In some messed up way, he is right. It was good, in a sense that at least he wasn't a ghost or there wasn't an evil twin. Honestly, those were the options. Those were the options. So what ends up happening in the movie is that right after he gets shot, the statesman guys show up and put on a plastic bag or whatever on his face and use a completely organic GMO preservative-free and not contrived plot convenience that amounts to a water-based lube called alpha gel. So Harry's back, but actually has amnesia. First of all, very original. Second of all, they pulled the biggest pussy move imaginable. This single twist brought the film from decent to outright a flop. It is such a weakling, idiotic, senseless move to have this amazing twist in the first movie and then undo it right in the second one. I think it is significantly worse that they walked it back rather than if they had never done it. It is such a cop-out. So naturally, after whatever slop this entire movie was, the bad reviews started to come in. Nonetheless, Matthew Vaughn continued to do what he does best. He began yapping about a third film. But before we would even get to that, he also decided that we needed a prequel. So he begins yapping about Kingsman, the great game, and said that it should be filming back-to-back with the next Exe film. The great game later became the Kingsman, and thus came the next installment of this flop era. Okay, so cliff notes. The movie kinda sucked and flopped. Shocker. Now the reason for it completely flopping isn't entirely up to anyone behind the film. The film kind of got screwed over in a crossfire of unfortunate circumstances. Don't get me wrong, Vaughn shares the blame in this, but let's continue. It was delayed, and I kid you not, 8 times. It was delayed 8 frigging times. The film was originally slated to release on the 8th of November in 2019. Then it was pushed to November 15th, 2019. Then to February 2020. Before anything major, we already have 2 delays in there, which is definitely a good sign, by the way. So then 2020 hits, and then the pandemic comes, and it gets a few more delays into 2021. There's also the factor of Fox-Disney acquisition of 2019 that happens. Disney apparently doesn't give a shit about Fox movies and delays it even more. The film ends up coming out on December of 2021, so the film basically sat in the can for at least 2 years. And it had trailers, it was announced and everything. The movie grossed barely anything, didn't recoup its budget, and was widely panned, so... The movie itself is about the creation of Kingsman, but very tangentially. It is set during World War I, and honestly, I think it is not even a movie. Okay, so the 2 things that work flawlessly in this film are the editing and the soundtrack. These are absolutely the highlights. And on that note, this movie kind of sort of felt like watching someone's editing reel rather than watching a movie. I get that they had to cram in a whole war into a single movie, but it brushes past it in such an incoherent manner. We don't really get a story. What we get is basically Kingsman UnIvErSe cliff notes on the First World War. And I don't want to be too mean about this movie, but it does feel like it shows the most unoriginal path for its plot in general, because it doesn't really feel like it has a lot to add to the World War I narrative. Sure, there is the story of Conrad and the Duke of Oxford in there, and those scenes are cool and epic, but did we really need to see that? I will compliment them on one thing. They have a very Kingsman twist right in the middle where Conrad gets shot in the head. That was good, that was great. Then there is the villain, Kingsman stock villain number 3, a kooky, quirky villain who tries to control the world, the Shepherd. I think that conceptually the villain is cool enough. He basically controls a secret society called the Flock that includes various high-ranking people from different countries. It is kinda sick, but the way he's used is mostly so uninspired, because all it amounts to really is that person X did this during the First World War because the Shepherd said so. Again, nothing of substance is being added. The twist reveal is that the Shepherd is just some Scotsman who really hates England and wants to use a world war to destroy it. There was zero build-up for the villain, the reveal was utter nonsense. I like how the movie wants you to think that figures like Rasputin would follow this lunatic when Rasputin held power on his own as was. The movie does not explain why anyone decided to become part of this flock, or why the Shepherd was the head of anything. Anyway, one of the movie's bigger sins is being a tad boring. We got that. It does have its moments, but I could have done without it. I don't feel like it adds much for me as a fan of the first film. Honestly, it might have done a bit better if it didn't have Kingsman connection, so the movie flopped. That didn't stop Vaughn from yapping though. He began talking about making a sequel to this one, called The Kingsman, The Traitor King in 2023. Yet finally, in 2024, when asked about any Kingsman sequels or prequels, the CEO of 20th Century Fox said, haha, nope, thus ending the road of the Kingsman franchise. Or so you think. Now, before we move on further, there is a question that keeps lingering over me. Why do people like Matthew Vaughn? Like, genuinely. The common underlying thread across each of the movies I just touched on is the fact that whether it's in reviews or in trailer comments, people consistently praise Vaughn. Literally, I am not joking. People keep praising him in all the ways they can. Some even go as far as to call him genius, some even compare it to Christopher Nolan. The same praise still continues to this day too. Now, the thing about me is that I didn't really know much about him before Kingsman, so naturally, I did some research to figure out what the deal was. If you go onto his Wikipedia page, you can see that he has directed 8 films in total. Out of all of them, I had already seen 6. And let me tell you, I didn't see anything that shook me to the core as far as to call the man a genius. The 2 movies I hadn't seen before were Kick-Ass and Layer Cake. So you know what? I watched those too. And here are some thoughts. They were nice. Sure, he has a unique flair. That is fun and cool, but surely that cannot be enough for him to earn the title of a genius. There is an interesting interview where he expresses his approach towards his movies.
You do seem to have this kind of inherent obligation just to entertain. It's one of the things I love about your movies. Just how vital is it that audiences have films of this ilk where they can just go into the cinema and just enjoy themselves for 90 minutes or, 100 minutes?
For me, I think that's the only reason to watch a film. Most of the movies that are nominated for Oscars put me to sleep. They're like TV films, I thought, and not Oscars for BAFTAs or whatever, but they'll probably get the Oscar nominations as well. But I'm the sort of filmmaker that grew up in the 70s, and I watched Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and I just sat there exhilarated and having the time of my life in the cinema, and I want to continue that tradition.
So if you tilt your head a little, you can sort of kind of see why people would cling on to a person like Vaughn. He represents a countercurrent to the perceived Oscar bait films that can be often too pretentious for their own good. He doesn't make movies that are supposed to have larger messages. He makes things to escape and for people to have fun. He's basically the type of person who appeals to the average moviegoer, or so you would think, because the amount of cognitive dissonance that this man generates sometimes is completely nuts. And he certainly doesn't act different from any other director. Now, there is an interesting interview with the man from 2014, around when the first film was released. Here he is quoted as saying, "I wanted to get back to a sense of fun," he explained. "The gadgets just being pure entertainment, not heavy. I think superhero films are going up their asses as well. Marvel, thank God, when I saw Guardians of the Galaxy, I was like, yeah, this is a film that's entertaining. It's taken some risks. It managed to make me care about a raccoon and a tree. This is a fucking genius piece of filmmaking. I'm like, how can I be caring and enjoying this so much?" Again, the context of this is that the first Kingsman film is about to be released. Early reviews are great, so all the praise is kind of getting to Vaughn's head. It is a bold statement to say that the genre of films are going up their asses, and a bold statement to put out into the world, and you sure as hell have to have the sheer skill to back it up. So a funny thing happens after the first film is released. The success of it gets into this dude's head in a big way. Honest to God, I had never, and I mean never seen someone so aggressively trying to turn something into a franchise. Remember when I said that there might be some additional motives in introducing Statemen in the second film? So here's a hot take. They were introduced solely to make spin-offs, because wouldn't you know it, right when the second movie came out, Vaughn immediately began yapping about spin-offs. "I think there's a story in my head which will be finished by the end of the next one. And then after that, then, of course, there could be Statesman movies. There could be spin-off character films. The universe could continue with new agents, or Colin could become Arthur, or new characters could come in, or new kids get trained. There are so many options. But I also think it's better not to be too greedy." He literally went on to announce the Statesman TV show afterwards. I do not even understand whether he understands what he is saying half of the time. Based upon his own words, you would think that someone in Hollywood finally gets it. Then he proceeds to go on and do the greediest shit imaginable. And by this I am talking about announcing sequels and spin-offs, opening an entire Kingsman store to promote a movie, releasing a mobile video game.
The Golden Circle is free to play, offers in-app purchases, and supports online player versus player multiplayer, while the Secret Service is sold as a paid game.
Which was a dumb puzzle game that was shut down several months later after careful consideration, and because nobody bothered to play it.
The Golden Circle is free to play, offers in-app purchases, and supports online player versus player multiplayer.
The man literally was so quick to announce spin-offs and sequels as soon as he got a taste of that box office money from the first one. He has talked about so many plans. It is like this man is just sitting there and throbbing, waiting for someone to ask about what is next in the franchise. And here Here is this article where he talks about the Kingsman. The filmmaker shares dreams for Kingsman 3 and even a potential Statesman streaming series, should the audience demand it. We don't want to get too greedy or too arrogant to think that we can make loads and loads of these. He says, while promoting a prequel that nobody asked for. Good job. The more nervous I make the movie executives, the more I believe in it. I just know it'll be different. I don't know whether it's going to work with an audience, but at least it'll feel that we're pushing the boundaries of filmmaking and doing things a little bit more different than just repeating the same formula. He says, while promoting a film that is just a stale retelling of World War I and was widely panned as boring. Again, good job. This man is just a huge yapper. Being a yapper myself, I recognize another yapper. He talks so much. He kept talking about Kingsman 3 for years, yet where is it? No. Instead, he went on to make a prequel to start another series of films. The dude cannot even finish one trilogy to save his life. What happened to shutting up, putting your head down and simply working instead of constantly showboating? So here's where my main qualms with the man comes in. The things that he says simply do not match up with the things that he does. He keeps talking about how comic book movies have gone up their ass and what has become of him. It took exactly one good idea for him to become obsessed with turning it into some big franchise. The sheer amount of force he applied to make it happen is laughable. He keeps talking about making movies that the audience demands, yet he either does them in ways that I doubt were demanded, or he makes movies nobody asked for. He might criticize Oscars, but the dude is quite obviously just as greedy as the rest of them. What is particularly agonizing is that he keeps using these grand ideas of audience demand like a shield. Do I even have to say that what the audience demands versus what he should actually get are not always the same thing? So you would think that after the fiasco of the 2 flops in a row, something would change. Yes, Golden Circle earned cash, but it was not as well received as the first. He would maybe get a grip. That is not what happened. He took a glance at his 2 little flops and thought, and I will do it again. But worse. So 2021 of the year of Jesus Christ rolls around, and Vaughn decides to go to Apple. Apple, for some unknown reason, decides to spend $200 million on this new idea that Vaughn is developing. The cast was packed. The marketing for this movie was bonkers. So they basically said that the movie was based upon a book by an author named Ellie Conway. The book was not even yet released. Miss Conway was absolutely no one. The whole thing is honestly deranged when you reflect on it. At some point, people speculated that Taylor Swift was Ellie Conway, which obviously she wasn't, so they released the damn book ahead of the movie. Some people come out to say that they wrote it, whatever. Then there comes the movie itself. What a disaster. If you are wondering what Vaughn himself had to say about the movie, well, he said that, "When I read this early draft manuscript, I felt it was the most incredible and original spy franchise since Ian Fleming's books of the 50s. This is going to reinvent the spy genre." You have to admire the lack of any self-reflection. What can I say? Did I watch the movie? Yes. Do I want to talk about it? Honestly, no. Just go watch any of the other videos that came out back when it was released. I have nothing to add to the discussion besides agreeing that it was bad. What is way more interesting is the approach that Vaughn takes with this entire ordeal.
Argyle, as I said, we've got the book coming out and we'd love to do the book next, and we have an Argyle 2 planned. So there is a universe, and what we're trying to do with Marv is sort of, Marvel to superheroes we want to be to spies as well. So we've got the Kingsman on the right, I'd say, Argyle's on the left, and then we've got an idea for something in the middle as well. And then you've got these sort of competing franchises in a galaxy that one day might meet.
And they might
meet, yeah.
So what our enlightened fella over there is trying to say is that Kingsman exists in the same universe as Argyle for some reason. The man still keeps on trying to make a big thing out of this. He also went on to say that this shitshake will have at least 2 sequels. Then he went on to say that no, there will actually be a prequel. Now, to cap all of this off, there is a funny article that came out after the release of Argyle. The title reads, "Matthew Vaughn talks vitriolic Argyle reviews. My guard came down. We didn't make Citizen Kane, but fucking hell. Then the reviews came out and I'm like, wait, what have I done to offend these people?" the director said. Listen, I get it. The reviews really were harsh. Everyone had it out for this one movie, and not always for very valid reasons, but certainly not a majority. And then he proceeds to say that, "My guard came down on Argyle," Vaughn told Empire. "We had done test screenings that had gone fantastically well." Proof? The premiere was a really fun night. It was like going back to the Snatch days where there was such excitement, and I started drinking the Kool-Aid. Did you really think that people were going to be honest with you to your face on the premiere night? The article also elaborates that he had a hard time believing the critical reception, even going to movie theaters to watch the movie again. I thought, maybe I've lost the plot now. It did rattle me, he said. I'm genuinely scratching my head about that, because you can't ignore it. It wasn't like just a few bad reviews. And you would think that this would be a nice little moment in his little character arc that he would finally reflect. You wish, pal. You wish. Plus, one never knows how attitudes could still change. We're doing very well on streaming, Vaughn said. People are liking it. Nothing would make me happier than making another one. I'm getting texts saying, wow, those reviews were fucking harsh. The more we can get people to watch Argyle, the more chance we make another one. I'd love to make another one. We've got it planned. Well, he said that last time with Kingsman. And do I need to say more? And he does threaten to release another movie in the post-credit scene of Argyle. So what is the moral of this story? Well, capitalism, kinda bad. I feel like there is a certain amount of hubris that surrounds this entire situation. Whether or not Matthew Vaughn wants to avoid being arrogant, I think it does indicate that he just expects people to like his movies just because he thinks they should. I think that Vaughn himself kind of underestimates what made Kingsman's first movie good. At a glance, sure, it was silly and goofy, but to pull it off, it still had to be smart. It can take a ton of effort to pull off an effortless fun romp. There has to be a certain amount of smarts in there. That is not even the main takeaway here. Just in general, can we talk about the piss-poor attempts to manufacture these supposed universes? It takes a lot of hubris to announce and release sequels and prequels, because you have to assume that people will come out to watch it solely because it has a recognizable name. The dude first put a bet on the Kingsman brand, which spectacularly failed, then put a bet on himself to redefine the genre of spy films, which spectacularly failed. That is because audiences are not just some mindless drones that you can spoon-feed some nonsense franchise slop, as if it is quantity that people are after. People do in fact smell the stench of shit when shit is put in front of them. Who would have thought that you would actually need to make a good movie to receive positive reception? Again, the most toxic words in today's media is a shared universe, and I hate the fact that studios are trying to manufacture them out of thin air just because it is the next gimmick. It is purely arrogant to think that people would tune into this type of stuff simply because it shares a universe. Not everything needs to be a franchise. Not everything needs to exist within a wider universe. I sincerely wish that Kingsman: The Secret Service rather remained standalone than to see that world be further tarnished, because in its current state, the Kingsman franchise has completely been ran into the ground solely because the people behind it valued expanding the franchise and collecting the bag, rather than creating a compelling narrative. But hey, what do I know?